The coffee was cold. The chair sagged beneath her like it had given up too. The house was far too quiet. No footsteps. No voice calling her name. Not even the faintest trace of him anymore. But once there was laughter here. Once there were promises. Laughter that cracked like fireworks. Promises whispered against her ear at midnight. What happened between the first kiss and the last slammed door? People think heartbreak is loud. It isn't. It's silent. It's invisible. It wraps itself around you like fog, until you can't tell where you end and the loneliness begins. She gave everything. She forgave what she should have walked away from. She waited when she should have run. She chased, believing love could be earned if you just held on tightly enough. But what happens when you hold too tightly to someone who's already slipping away? What happens when the person you chase starts running faster? One night, one single brutal night, she finally stopped running. And when she did, something inside her woke up. Something fierce. Something untouchable. Something that whispered, "You were never meant to chase anyone. You were meant to be the prize." And from that moment on, everything changed. But not the way she or anyone else expected. The first morning without him was brutal. Not because he was gone, but because she realized how little of herself was left. The sunlight slipped into the empty bedroom like an unwelcome guest. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting in her lap, staring at nothing. No messages. No footsteps. No reasons to pretend anymore. For a long time she stayed like that, frozen between the life she had lost and the life she was too afraid to imagine. Who was she now without him? What dreams were left after years of putting his first? What desires were buried under the ashes of compromise? The coffee pot clicked on automatically, a small mercy she had forgotten setting. She stood, wrapped the old cardigan tighter around her body, and made her way to the kitchen. Each step felt like stepping through someone else's house. Not hers. Not yet. She remembered once, in a life that seemed 100 years ago, she dreamed of Paris. Of painting on Sundays. Of writing letters to herself in journals she would never let anyone else read. When was the last time she picked up a brush? When was the last time she wrote anything that wasn't a grocery list or an apology? She sipped the bitter coffee and stared out the window. The world outside hadn't noticed she was broken. Birds still sang. Cars still rushed by. The neighbor's dog barked like nothing had changed. Maybe the world wouldn't wait for her to heal. Maybe she would have to heal inside the chaos. The thought was terrifying. And yet, there was something oddly freeing about it. No one was coming to save her. Not a man. Not a miracle. No knight on a white horse. It would have to be her. Only her. And that realization, it burned a little. But it also sparked something tiny, stubborn, electric, in the hollow place inside her chest. She wouldn't run anymore. She wouldn't beg anymore. She wouldn't shrink to fit a man's life anymore. She would build her own life, piece by piece, dream by dream, even if she had to drag herself through every lonely morning until she remembered how to breathe without crying. Even if she had to fight herself every time doubt crept in, whispering she wasn't enough. She rinsed the coffee mug, set it in the sink. Her hands shook slightly, but they were steady enough. In the back of the hallway closet, buried under winter coats and boxes of forgotten memories, she found it. A small dust-covered canvas, an old wooden box of paints, a half-empty journal with a broken spine. She sat on the floor, cradling them like old friends she had lost touch with but never truly forgotten. The colors inside the paint box were dried out, cracked, almost useless. The journal pages were yellowed, curling at the edges. But they were hers. They had waited for her. Just like a part of her had waited all these years to be chosen first. Not second. Not after him. Not when it was convenient. First. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they didn't come from sadness. They came from something cleaner. Something older than hurt. Something deeper than loneliness. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her cardigan and whispered out loud, as if promising the walls, the house, the aching parts of herself, "I choose me." The words tasted strange at first, almost forbidden. But as she said them again and again, they began to root themselves in the hollow places inside her. "I choose me. I choose me. I choose me." And in that choosing she started to bloom. Not for anyone else. Not to be loved. Not to be seen. Not to be saved. Just because she deserved it. Outside, the morning light grew stronger. The street filled with life again. And inside that little house, a woman picked up a worn-out paintbrush with trembling fingers and painted her first stroke back into the world. Healing didn't happen in grand gestures. It didn't arrive like a storm, tearing through her world and putting everything back together overnight. No, it came quietly, patiently, in moments so small she almost missed them. It came the first time she laughed, really laughed, at a sitcom playing in the background. It came the morning she woke up and realized she hadn't thought of him in 3 full hours. It came when she bought herself flowers without waiting for someone else to. Little rebellions. Tiny acts of defiance against the woman she used to be. There was no audience. No one clapped. No one cheered. And yet, inside her, something stronger was growing. She started wearing lipstick again. Not because anyone would see her. Not because it was for a date. But because when she caught her reflection in the mirror, a spark flickered across her face. A glimpse of the woman she had forgotten. One afternoon, standing in the middle of the grocery store, she picked up a bottle of wine she had never dared try before. Deep red. Bold. The label read, "Untamed Spirit." She smiled, small secret. Perfect. At home, she sipped it slowly, letting the flavor settle on her tongue. Letting herself feel luxurious, even if no one else ever knew. Every choice became a revolution. A quiet reclaiming of power. She painted late into the night, smearing bold colors across the canvas without worrying whether they made sense. She journaled fiercely, scribbling down truths she had been too afraid to say out loud. She played music too loud in the kitchen and danced barefoot on the cold tiles, laughing at how silly and alive she felt. And slowly, piece by piece, she stitched herself back together. Not into the woman she used to be. Not into the wife she once was. Not into a version anyone expected. But into someone entirely new. Someone unafraid of her own solitude. Someone unwilling to beg for attention. Someone who understood, finally, that love isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you when you're too busy loving your own damn life to notice. Men started to notice her again. Of course they did. There was something different about her now. Not in her clothes. Not in her makeup. Not even in her smile. It was the way she carried herself. The way she filled a room without trying. The way her laughter rang out, full and easy, untouched by desperation. She didn't chase. She didn't plead. She didn't linger too long at conversations waiting for someone to validate her. If a man spoke to her, she smiled, kind, warm, but distant. If he didn't, she smiled anyway, because her happiness had stopped depending on whether or not someone noticed her. She noticed herself. One night, at a cozy little wine bar she wandered into on a whim, she sat alone at a small table near the window, sipping wine, sketching ideas into her journal, humming along to the faint music playing overhead. A man approached, handsome, confident, charming in the way men are when they're used to women leaning forward, wide-eyed and eager. He smiled, introduced himself, offered to buy her a drink. She thanked him politely but shook her head, closed her journal with a gentle tap. "I'm good," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. Her eyes held his for a beat longer than necessary. Steady, unafraid, detached. And in that moment something shifted. He wasn't used to it. Wasn't used to women who didn't chase. He lingered a little too long, fumbling for another line. She just smiled, easy, kind, and turned her gaze back out the window. The stars above the city sparkled like tiny promises she had made to herself. He left eventually. Of course he did. And she stayed. In her own skin. In her own joy. In her own power. That night, walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, she realized something important. It wasn't about punishing men. It wasn't about closing her heart. It wasn't even about proving anything. It was about this. She was no longer willing to abandon herself just to be chosen by someone else. She was already chosen. By the one person who mattered most. By herself. She tilted her head back, laughing softly at the stars. She felt untouchable. Invincible. Alive in a way she hadn't been since before she knew what heartbreak even tasted like. And somewhere deep inside, a new truth settled in her bones. A truth she would never unlearn. You don't chase love. You attract it. by becoming love itself. It started happening without her even noticing. Men, they looked at her differently now. Not like a prize to win. Not like a solution to their loneliness. Not even like a challenge. But like a mystery. Something rare. Something they couldn't quite touch, no matter how close they stood. She didn't dress any differently. She didn't speak any louder. She didn't flirt harder. She simply existed. At peace. Complete. And there is nothing more magnetic in this world than a woman who is not searching. They asked for her number. They lingered too long by her side. They laughed a little too hard at her jokes. They tried to find a way in. But she had changed. And not all who knocked would be allowed through the door. One afternoon at a quiet art gallery, she noticed him. Or rather, he noticed her first. Tall. Sharp smile. The kind of man who used to make her heart race and her stomach tie itself in knots. He struck up a conversation, casual but intentional. Asked about her thoughts on the abstract paintings. Laughed when she gave an answer that wasn't what he expected. There was a time not so long ago when she would have leaned in. Matched his energy. Given just a little more of herself than she should have. But now? Now she simply smiled. Tilted her head. Listened carefully. And when he asked if she'd like to get coffee sometime, she paused. Not because she didn't want to, but because she knew now that she had the right to choose. Not out of fear of being alone. Not out of hope that he might be the one. But out of the simple, radical understanding that her time was precious. She agreed lightly, easily. Not with the urgency of a woman afraid to miss her chance. But with the calm certainty of someone who knows that real connections aren't forced. They are felt. Over coffee he tried to impress her. Stories about his job. His travels. His ambitions. She smiled, listened, nodded. But inside, she was no longer building castles on his promises. No longer projecting fairy tales onto strangers. She wasn't auditioning for a place in anyone's life anymore. If anything, he was auditioning for a place in hers. And it wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bitterness. It was simply the natural result of knowing her own worth. At one point, he reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly over her hand. A move so practiced it was almost laughable. She pulled her hand back, not abruptly, not rudely, but with a gentle, unmistakable boundary. A line drawn in velvet. Soft, but absolute. He blinked, surprised. Most women didn't say no to him. Most women didn't make him work for it. She smiled again, warm, unbothered. Sipped her coffee. Changed the subject. Because she knew. Affection offered too quickly is often affection unearned. And she was done giving away parts of herself like free samples at a grocery store. If he wanted to know her, really know her, he would have to do more than flash a charming smile. He would have to be patient, consistent, honest, real. And even then, there were no guarantees. Because the prize was not just her presence. It was her trust, her heart, her peace. And those things were sacred now. Walking home after their coffee, she felt no butterflies, no desperate hopes, no anxious overthinking. She simply felt steady, whole, rooted in herself. She didn't check her phone every 5 minutes. She didn't analyze every word he said, looking for signs. She didn't wonder if she had said too much or too little. She lived her life. She let the hours unfold without needing to fill them with anyone else's validation. And maybe he would call. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, she would be just fine. Because here's the truth no one tells you. When you stop needing someone else to complete you, you become the one thing no man can ever forget. Freedom isn't about having no one to love. Freedom is about having the power to walk away from anyone who doesn't love you right. And that power, it's intoxicating. It's undeniable. It's the kind of power that shifts the way you move through the world. Head high, heart open, soul untouchable. That night, lying in her bed with the windows cracked open to the warm night air, she smiled to herself in the darkness. Not because she had met someone, not because she had been noticed, but because she had finally noticed herself. And she was magnificent. With or without him. With or without anyone. It happened on a Sunday morning. The kind of morning that smelled like fresh coffee and second chances. She wasn't looking. She wasn't hoping. She was simply living. walking through the farmer's market, admiring the wildflowers and sun-ripened tomatoes, letting the hum of life wrap around her like a soft, familiar blanket. And then, there he was. Not flashy, not trying too hard, not shouting for attention, just a man in a navy sweater, smiling down at a jar of honey like it held all the secrets of the universe. Their eyes met by accident. No fireworks. No slow-motion music swelling in the background. Just a quiet click. Like the last puzzle piece sliding into place. He smiled first. She smiled back, slow and deliberate, without lowering her gaze. He didn't rush over. Didn't pounce. Didn't bombard her with lines or questions or compliments. Instead, he wandered a little closer, asked casually, "Have you ever tried this?" Holding up the jar of honey like a peace offering. She shook her head. "First time for everything," she said. And just like that, a conversation bloomed between them. Easy, unforced, organic. No agendas. No pretending. No desperate need to impress. It was unsettling in a way. She had grown so used to men either chasing her too hard or giving up the moment she didn't make it easy. But he was different. He didn't seem to want to catch her. He seemed to want to walk beside her. They strolled through the market together, not quite touching, yet somehow connected, talking about books, childhood dreams, places they wanted to see before they died. He didn't pepper her with compliments. He didn't make grand promises. He simply showed up with curiosity, with kindness, with presence. And she found herself laughing. Real laughter, bubbling up from a place inside her she thought had gone silent. He asked if she'd like to grab a coffee. She agreed. Not because she was lonely, not because she was desperate, but because she genuinely wanted to know more about the man who wasn't trying to steal her heart, only earn a place in her afternoon. At the coffee shop, he listened more than he spoke. When he asked questions, they weren't shallow. They were the kind that made her think, made her smile, made her feel seen, not as a project, not as a conquest, but as a whole, complicated, extraordinary woman. And for the first time in a long time, she realized something both exhilarating and terrifying. She had a choice to make. Not the choice between him and loneliness. Not the choice between chasing or settling. But the choice between staying guarded behind the walls she had built, or opening a door just a crack and letting someone worthy step inside. She sipped her coffee, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. The old fears whispered at the edges of her mind. What if you get hurt again? What if he's too good to be true? What if you lose yourself all over again? But another voice, quieter and steadier, rose to meet them. What if it's different this time? Not because he was different, but because she was. She wasn't the woman who would fold herself small just to be loved. She wasn't the woman who would chase approval like scraps thrown from a table. She wasn't the woman who needed to be saved. She was the woman who could choose. Freely, clearly, powerfully. She set her cup down and met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "I don't rush things anymore," she said softly, almost like a confession. He smiled, slow, genuine. "Neither do I." There was no performance, no push, no panic, just a simple acknowledgement between two souls who had learned, often the hard way, that the best things in life aren't chased. They are invited, they are grown, they are chosen, not out of need, but out of abundance. They parted ways that afternoon with a promise to meet again. No pressure, no promises carved in stone, just the mutual understanding that something rare had sparked. Walking home, she didn't replay every moment. She didn't weigh every word. She didn't wonder what he thought of her. She thought about what she thought of him. She thought about how, for the first time in so long, the idea of letting someone in didn't feel like a threat. Felt like a gift. One she would give carefully, slowly, deliberately, when she was ready, when he had proven worthy. Not because she needed him to fix her. Not because she needed him to complete her. But because she had already completed herself. And that was the secret she had been chasing all along. She didn't rush. She didn't fall. She didn't lose herself. She chose. Carefully. Deliberately. And when they met again, over tea this time in a quiet corner of a park, there was no need to impress. No masks. No games. He asked questions but didn't pry. He listened but didn't press. He shared but didn't overshare to fill the silence. And she realized something beautiful. The right man wouldn't want to break down her walls. He would respect them, wait for her to open them in her own time, or not at all. She told him about her art, about her dreams, about the mistakes she wasn't ashamed of anymore. And he listened, truly listened, not with the restless energy of someone waiting for his turn to speak, but with the patient attentiveness of someone who valued every word she chose to share. There were no promises, no declarations of forever, no fairy tales scribbled in haste, just two people, choosing to meet each other exactly where they were. She liked him, but more importantly, she liked herself around him. No shrinking, no pretending, no bending herself into shapes to fit his expectations. She was enough exactly as she was, and he seemed to understand that without her having to explain it. There were moments when old habits whispered in her ear. Say yes just to be agreeable. Laugh at the joke you don't find funny. Don't be too strong. It might scare him away. But she silenced them with a gentle shake of her head. Not this time. Never again. She spoke her truth, even when her voice trembled. She set her boundaries, even when it would have been easier to let them slide. She stayed rooted in herself, even when the temptation to slip into old patterns tugged at her. And a miracle happened. He stayed, not because she made herself smaller, but because she stood in her fullness, unapologetic and real. He admired her fire, not just her softness. He honored her boundaries, not just her beauty. He respected her no's as much as her yes. This was what she had been building toward all along. Not just finding someone, but finding herself first so that when love came, it would be love that honored her wholeness, not love that demanded her sacrifice. They moved slowly, intentionally, like two dancers learning a new rhythm. Sometimes she pulled back, testing, watching, protecting herself. And he never chased. He waited, with patience, with respect, with a quiet understanding that real trust is earned, not demanded. She saw the difference now. The boy she had chased in her youth had wanted possession, control, validation. This man wanted partnership, freedom, growth. He wasn't threatened by her strength. He didn't need her to dim her light to feel powerful. He didn't see her independence as a challenge to conquer. He saw it for what it was, a gift, and he treated it as such. The first time he reached for her hand, he didn't pull. He simply offered. An open palm, a quiet invitation, and she chose, again and again, to meet him there. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted to, because she could walk away at any time. And that freedom made every step toward him a true choice. Not fear, not loneliness, not desperation. Love, real grown sacred love. Love that says, I see you, I honor you, I will never ask you to be less. It wasn't perfect. There were misunderstandings, disagreements, moments of doubt, but each time she returned to herself first, checked her own compass, listened to her own heart. She didn't lose herself in him, and because of that, she could love him with a fullness that didn't cost her her soul. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun slip below the horizon, he turned to her and said, quietly, You are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. Not because he said it, not because she needed him to say it, but because she already knew it to be true. Deep in her bones, written into every piece of herself she had fought to reclaim. She smiled, leaning back into the chair, the warm air wrapping around her like a blessing. Not every woman gets to this place. Not every woman learns the sacred art of choosing herself first. But she had. Through every heartbreak, through every tear, through every lonely night spent rebuilding from the rubble, she had chosen herself. And because of that, love had found her. Not as a rescue, not as a reward, but as a reflection of the woman she had finally become. Unshakable, unchaseable, unforgettable. She sat by the window, pen in hand, the city lights blinking like distant stars beyond the glass. The night was warm, heavy with memories. But tonight she didn't run from them. She welcomed them. She opened the old journal, the one she had hidden years ago, and on the first blank page, she wrote, "Dear me, I forgive you. I forgive you for every time you begged to be loved. For every night you cried into your pillow, thinking you weren't enough. For every moment you believed you had to chase someone to feel worthy. You didn't know better. You did what you thought you had to do to survive. You thought love was something to be earned through sacrifice and silence. But now I know the truth. You were always enough. You didn't have to become smaller, quieter, softer just to be chosen. You didn't have to twist yourself into knots, trying to fit into someone else's dream. You were the dream. You were the prize. You were the home you were always searching for in others. I want you to know, the woman you became fought for us. She built a life where love is a gift, not a transaction. Where self-respect isn't negotiable. Where peace is non-negotiable. She is not perfect. She still stumbles, still questions, still wonders if she's doing enough. But she never forgets who she is anymore. And she never ever chases love. Because she understands now. Real love doesn't make you run after it. Real love meets you where you stand. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for dreaming, even when it hurt. Thank you for holding on, even when you didn't know what you were holding on for. I promise to never abandon you again. I promise to choose you, always. Love, the woman you fought so hard to become. She closed the journal softly, pressing her palm against the worn cover as if sealing the words inside her bones. No tears, no regret, just a quiet, powerful peace. She stood, pulling the window open wider, letting the warm air kiss her skin. The city pulsed below her, alive and relentless. And she was part of it now. Not hiding, not shrinking, not chasing, living, choosing, thriving. And somewhere deep inside, a voice rose up, steady, proud, unstoppable. I am enough. I have always been enough. And from this day forward, I will never forget it. If this story touched something inside you today, I would love to hear from you. What part of your journey are you standing in right now? Have you ever felt the power of choosing yourself first? Drop a comment below. Your story matters here. And if you're ready for more conversations about love, growth, and rediscovering your self-worth, make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning. In our next videos, we'll dive even deeper into building unshakable confidence, setting sacred boundaries, and attracting the kind of life and love you truly deserve. You are not alone. You are powerful beyond measure. And you are exactly where you need to be. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Until next time, stay strong, stay radiant, and most importantly, stay true to you.